Why would a 9-year-old girl smile while staring into hell? A 9-year-old girl had just come back to life after being clinically dead, and the first thing she said was, "I saw hell, and I wasn't afraid." That sentence made her mother break down in tears, left the doctor frozen in silence, and seemed to drop the temperature of the entire hospital room. But the strangeness didn't end there. When the adults asked her what she saw, she only smiled and answered in a voice as soft as wind slipping through a window, "If I tell you, grown-ups won't believe me." What could be so terrifying that a child could face it, and yet believe adults wouldn't have the courage to hear it? What could cause a little girl who had just returned from the edge of death to smile not because she survived, but because she had seen something beyond life itself? Was she hallucinating? Or had she truly stepped through a door most of us spend our lives avoiding? And if what she said was true, why didn't she cry? Why did she smile? Was what she saw a warning, or a kind of rescue? Was it an ending, or an invitation to begin? Her name is Emma Grace Williams. She is 9 years old and lives in a small town tucked near the woods in northern North Carolina, where the spring sky is so blue it convinces people everything is still at peace. Emma is the kind of child who likes to draw clouds with a purple crayon, believes butterflies carry letters from heaven, and once asked her mother, "If I pray and no one answers, am I talking to myself?" Her mother held her close that day and said, "God hears everything, sweetheart. He just answers in his way." Maybe Emma believed her. Or maybe she simply remembered those words. Until the night everything stopped. But before we speak of that night, the night that changed everything, let's return to Emma's smile. The smile that came after death. A smile that didn't look like joy. Didn't feel like triumph. It looked like someone who had come back from a place no one dares to look and returned holding a secret that was waiting to be revealed. For some reason, Emma didn't share it right away. No one pressed her. But the way she looked at her mother, the way her eyes lingered on the hospital window, the way she stared into the space as if someone was standing there, all of it said more than words ever could. She had seen, and she had been told. But Emma didn't just see heaven. She stepped through somewhere else. A place where light could not reach. A place where prayers got stuck in the throat. A place where souls who didn't know they were dead kept searching for an answer. And you won't be able to imagine what waits in that place until you hear Emma's story for yourself. Emma Grace Williams was born on a softly raining morning in early April, when the Carolina sky was just cool enough to pull up an extra blanket, but not so cold that you needed to turn on the heat. She grew up in a small wooden house on the edge of the forest, where birdsong echoed at dawn and sunlight streamed through the windows like golden threads. Her family wasn't rich nor poor, but lived peacefully with the simple things. Pancakes her mother made for breakfast, Sunday afternoons at church with her father, and quiet evenings listening to her mother read scripture before bed. But there was something about Emma that set her apart from other children. She didn't care for video games, flashing lights, or noisy crowds. She preferred sitting alone, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. She liked drawing doors no one ever opened, listening to the sound of water dripping from the roof, and asking her mother if water would feel sad knowing it would soon disappear. Her mother laughed and said she had a big imagination. But sometimes, behind that laughter, there was a flicker of concern in her mother's eyes as if Emma saw something she could not. At school, Emma wasn't the top student, but teachers remembered her for asking unusual questions. Like the time during science class, when the teacher was explaining the heart and how blood circulates, Emma raised her hand and asked, "If the heart stops beating for a few minutes but the soul stays, can the body come back to life?" The class laughed. The teacher looked puzzled and said that kind of thing belonged to religion or fantasy. Emma just nodded and fell silent. She didn't argue. She didn't press. She simply asked, then remembered. That night, the clock on the hospital wall seemed to forget how to move. Every minute stretched into what felt like an entire year. Emma's mother sat beside the hospital bed, holding her daughter's tiny hand, warm at first, then slowly growing cold. But she kept holding on tightly, as if squeezing just a little harder might be enough to keep that fragile soul from slipping away. Everything had happened so quickly, no one had time to process it. Emma, the healthy little girl who had sung in church that very morning, now lay motionless as her pulse faded into silence. The doctors said she had fallen into a deep coma. Her heart had stopped beating for more than 4 minutes. The monitors showed a flat neurological response. No brain activity. No signs of life. And then, for a moment, it was as if the crowded hospital room had gone completely still. No one spoke. Nothing moved. The only thing that remained was helplessness. But somewhere else, something had just begun. Emma doesn't remember how she died. There was no thunderclap, no blinding light, no voice calling her name. It was simply that every sound began to fade. The beating of her heart dissolved. The sound of her mother weeping vanished into nothing. And then suddenly, she found herself standing there, beside the hospital bed, looking at her own body lying still like a dropped doll. She didn't feel afraid. She didn't cry. She was simply puzzled, like a child staring into a mirror and realizing her reflection was no longer looking back. She turned to call for her mother, but her mouth made no sound. She took a step forward, but her feet never touched the floor. And then, from the corner of the room, a figure began to appear. It wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't anyone from her family. The figure stood still, not approaching, not speaking. The light in the room suddenly softened, as if a separate glow had formed around the two of them. Emma turned and looked into the person's eyes. There was no specific color, nothing intense, just eyes that knew everything, eyes that had seen every lost soul and never once turned away. And in that moment, without a word, Emma understood. It was him. No introduction needed, no miracle required. It was the same presence she had dreamed of, prayed to, and now it was simply there. Every unanswered question suddenly felt irrelevant, because that presence was the answer. Emma doesn't remember how she left the hospital. All she knows is that after that gaze, everything around her faded, replaced by a field of light as soft as morning mist. It wasn't blinding, but it was enough to dissolve every trace of fear. No more heartbeat, no more gravity, no more name, only a deep peace, as if she had always belonged there and had only just remembered. And her journey began from that very moment. A journey with no road, yet somehow guided. No voice calling, yet every step felt exactly right. And at the end of that corridor of light, Emma saw a door. Not a physical door, but an opening in space itself. And from within it, there were no angels, no singing voices, but crying. Countless cries echoed like the voices of thousands of souls calling out for something they had long lost. And Emma, without knowing why, stepped forward, because something inside that space was waiting for her. Something adults have always called the most terrifying place after death. But Emma wasn't afraid, because perhaps she had been there before. There was no sound of a door opening, no hinges, no signal that something had changed. But Emma knew she had crossed into another place. A place where time no longer existed, where limits were gone, where matter and names had no meaning. There was no before, no after, only now, but it was a now that kept moving. Each step she took was as light as a breath. She didn't touch the ground. She didn't need to move in any physical way, and yet she felt herself going into a realm not found on any map ever drawn by human hands. The light here didn't come from a source. It felt like mist, like the pulse of an invisible heart. Everything was gentle yet vivid, without color, yet it made Emma see more than her human eyes ever could. She didn't hear with her ears, but with her heart. She didn't see with her eyes, but with her soul. And in that sensation, Emma understood she was being led not by a hand, not by a voice, but by a kind of knowing that whispered in every particle of light around her. Emma passed by beings she didn't know how to name. They had no defined shapes, yet she could feel they had once been human. They didn't speak, but their stories rose into her awareness like images in her mind. A mother who regretted not holding her child more. A man broken by a lifetime spent chasing wealth. A child left behind on a cold doorstep. These memories weren't Emma's, but they touched her the way wind touches a still lake, stirring something deep inside her she couldn't explain. And in that moment, she understood this wasn't heaven. This was the middle space, a realm between realms. Not a place for judgment, but a place for remembering. Each soul here was reliving what they had forgotten. Love, mistakes, longing, tenderness never expressed. Emma walked among them, not afraid, only quiet. She felt a weight building in her chest, not because she was being held back, but because she was carrying the sorrow of those who had not yet let go. And then she saw something ahead, a darker space. Not darkness itself, but a place where the light no longer reached. As if even light hesitated to enter. Emma paused. A question rose from somewhere inside, not spoken by any voice. Are you certain you want to step forward? Yet fear was absent. It was not courage. She simply no longer separated what should or should not be. Every movement felt like an invitation, so she moved on. Inside, the temperature fell, not in degrees but in feeling. The atmosphere thickened, as if the space had been compressed by millions of muted sobs. Emma saw no flames and no demons like the pictures adults use to frighten children. Instead, She sensed unseen rooms where souls were trapped inside thoughts that had never been forgiven. A woman kept crying, "If only I had one more day," repeating the same plea. A teenage boy sat in a shadowed corner, unaware he had died, striking an invisible wall and asking why everyone had abandoned him. They were not being punished. They were held by what they refused to release: guilt, hatred, regret. Emma stood quietly, her hands clasped. Then she noticed something she would never forget. A boy about her age, empty-eyed, sitting beside a guitar with broken strings. He said nothing but gazed at Emma, and for the first time on this journey, she stepped back, not in fear but in recognition. She had met him many times in her dreams, and now he was here, where light could not reach. Emma did not know why she was allowed to witness these things, or why a child could walk through a place adults avoid, yet she began to see one truth. The most frightening place is not hell itself, but the state of a soul trapped in the question, "Am I forgivable?" Beyond that shadowed region, a light was calling her forward, because someone was still waiting, the only one who could answer. When Emma stepped out of the darkness, she didn't enter a new place. It felt more like she was stepping out of a long forgotten. The light here didn't come from the sun or a lamp. It came from the very air, from invisible waves that moved through her mind. It wasn't blinding, wasn't hot, and didn't dazzle the eyes. It was like her mother's lullaby when she was small, like her father's voice reading scripture at night, like the gentle cooing of morning doves, but without sound. It was my memory. It was peace. It was everything Emma had ever felt, but never known how to name. There were no roads, no houses, no angels with wings. But Emma knew she had entered a place untouched by time. Nothing happened in sequence. Everything was happening all at once. Stories from all ages, emotions unspoken, prayers whispered across the world all flowed together in a single current. And somehow, Emma understood all of it, not through language, but through feeling. It wasn't like hearing a tale. It was like remembering something she had known before she was born. She was being guided, though no one led her. She simply knew which way to go, as if each step was gently whispered by the light itself. A space opened before her, not a room, not a hall, just a vast presence. And there, Emma became aware of other souls. They had no bodies, yet they were fully present. Each one radiated absolute truth. No one hid. No one pretended. In this place, pretending was impossible. Every thought, every feeling, every fear, and every love poured outward like light. No one judged another, because no one stood above another. And then, amid that transparency, a greater presence began to shine. There was no introduction, no announcement, but every soul fell quiet, because he was coming. A presence beyond words, yet so familiar that Emma's heart tightened with recognition. She didn't need anyone to say it. She knew instantly it was Jesus. Not like the pictures in church. No crown, no long white robe, no glowing halo. And yet, it was him. Because of his eyes. The eyes that knew everything and still loved. Eyes that had witnessed betrayal, weakness, disappointment, rebellion, and still forgave. Emma felt no fear. She did not kneel or weep. She simply stood there like a child returning home after a long trip, certain that no explanation was needed. Jesus spoke first not with words, but as a gentle breeze in her mind. "You have always belonged to the light, even when you could not see it. I have not come to judge. I have come to help you remember." In that moment, Emma viewed her entire life not as pictures, but as the deepest feeling of every choice, every word, every moment of love, and each burst of anger. Everything appeared, not for condemnation, but for healing. Jesus neither reproached nor praised. He simply revealed, and within that truth, Emma sensed a love beyond understanding. She wanted to stay, to dissolve into that light, yet part of her knew the time had not come. One more reason brought her here, something she needed to see, and then remember. Jesus then said, not listen, but look. A veil of light opened before her, showing not heaven but another image, a future, a path, a decision that stands before the world. If you saw it, would you have the courage to return? Jesus didn't simply look at Emma. He looked through her, as if his gaze was opening a door not to some distant place, but into the very heart of humanity. No hand was raised, no voice was heard, but Emma knew she needed to see. She needed to witness it all. And then, not through words, but through the deepest feeling, he whispered, "Look at the world as I see it." The light around Emma began to shift, forming images that flowed like a stream of time. But it wasn't a future carved in stone. It was a future built moment by moment through the daily choices of humankind. Emma saw a vast city where millions walked with heads down, eyes locked on glowing screens, ears filled with noise, but hearts empty of connection. Children sat before blinking monitors, their mouths closed, their voices unused. She saw families eating at the same table, but not speaking. A father shouting into his phone while his daughter quietly wiped away tears. A mother working 3 jobs, awake through the night, and inside her, prayer had turned into a weary sigh. No one was evil. No one was cruel. But they had all forgotten. Forgotten how to love. Forgotten how to listen. Forgotten how to pause and look up at the sky and feel small in a sacred way. Emma saw a classroom where the teacher lectured with tired eyes and the students responded with yawns. There were no questions in their minds anymore, only answers memorized for the next test. She saw a girl around her age quietly deleting a post because no one had liked it. And in that girl's eyes, there was nothing. As if her worth had been hung on a button that never lit up. Emma felt a pain in her chest, but it wasn't her pain alone. It was the echo of millions of souls slowly dying not from disease, but from the absence of love. Then Emma saw places torn by war, where prayers were drowned out by explosions. She saw people who had left their homelands, wandering across borders with nothing in their eyes but the need to survive. She saw hands reaching out that were never taken. And the last place she saw was a scorched land, no trees, no water, cracked earth under a smoke-choked sky. A child was born in the ruins, looked upward, and did not cry. Emma suddenly understood that silence is the saddest sound of all. Jesus didn't ask, "Do you see?" He allowed Emma to feel. Because if the heart cannot feel, no amount of seeing will matter. Something unnamed rose within her, a mix of fear, tenderness, the urge to flee, and the longing to hold the whole world close. But he looked at Emma with a quiet gaze. A gaze that said, "That is why you must go back." Emma understood. He never forced. He only revealed. And once something is truly seen, it cannot be ignored. But she was only a child. How could one small voice stir a world that has fallen asleep? How could someone so young break through the walls of numbness? Jesus didn't answer. But for the first time, he lifted his hand and touched her forehead. And in that moment, Emma saw something strange and beautiful in every person, every soul. Even those drowning in guilt, rage, or emptiness still carried a flicker of light. Small, but not extinguished. It lived deep within. Sometimes it showed as a hidden tear, an apology never spoken, an embrace never given. That flicker was the doorway to awakening. And if a child who once died and returned could reach even one heart, then it was enough to begin. Emma turned to him, and for the first time since arriving in that realm of light, she spoke. Her voice trembled, but held steady resolve. "If I tell them everything, will they believe me?" Jesus looked at her. He didn't smile. He didn't offer promises. He simply answered with a truth she would carry for the rest of her life. You don't need them to believe right away. You only need to plant what they once knew, but have forgotten. And the door behind began to open. But before she returned, Emma had one more question to ask. A question no one had ever dared to ask. Before Emma left that realm of light, just as the doorway back began to open, she didn't rush through it. Though she understood what she had seen, one question remained unspoken. It had been quietly resting in her heart since the beginning of the journey. She turned back and faced Jesus not with the innocence of a child, but with a trembling confusion that was deeply real. If you love everyone, then why do you allow people to suffer so much? Jesus didn't answer quickly, because that question has no simple reply. Not because he didn't know, but because there are truths that can only be grasped through experience, not through words. His eyes were not sorrowful and not angry. They were silent. And in that silence, Emma saw the pain unfolding across the world. The mothers who had lost their children, the children with no one to hold them, the people praying in desperation and believing no one would ever hear. But at the same time, she saw something else. Hands reaching for one another, trembling but still reaching. A father digging through rubble to find his child. A nurse refusing to leave a dying patient's side. A child handing food to someone sleeping on the street. Small things. Quiet things. Things not covered by news cameras. No applause, no headlines. And yet these were the thin strands of light holding the world together. And Emma understood that God does not make people suffer. He allows them to choose. Because real love always comes with freedom. And within that freedom, there is always a door to return. Even if you've wandered far, Jesus lowered himself to her level. Not to teach, but to meet her eye to eye. And he asked, "Do you want to go back?" The question carried no pressure, but it wasn't light either. Because going back meant returning with wounds. It meant stepping into a world that mocks the sacred, where love breaks easily, where truth is twisted, and where the words of children are often ignored. Emma remained silent. A part of her wanted to stay in the place where no one was ever abandoned, where nothing needed to be explained, where every presence felt complete. But then she remembered her mother. She remembered the worry in her eyes that night. She remembered her father's hand resting gently on her shoulder when he prayed. She remembered her friends, who didn't yet understand what light truly was. She even remembered the souls she had seen in the darkness, still stuck, still hoping. And above all, Emma remembered the words, "You don't need them to believe right away. You only need to plant what they once knew but have forgotten." She nodded, not the nod of an obedient child, but of a soul that had seen both light and shadow, had understood, and had made a choice. And in that moment, the light around her began to withdraw, not vanishing, but folding inward, as if moving to a deeper place within her heart. Jesus did not walk her back. He simply stood there watching. But Emma knew his gaze would never leave her, no matter where she went, no matter who believed, no matter how loud the world might become. Just before returning, Emma whispered not a question but a promise. "I will tell them, even if no one believes me, even if I'm just a child. I will tell them." And that whisper moved outward like a seed falling into the soul of a thirsty world. When Emma opened her eyes in the hospital, she did not scream. She didn't cry. She didn't act like something miraculous had happened. She simply smiled, like someone who had just returned from a place where questions no longer needed answers. But what sent chills through the room was not that she had come back to life. It was what she said next, words no one had taught her, no one had spoken, and no one ever imagined a child would know. And her very first words silenced the room, as if something sacred had just been touched. Emma woke up at 4:12 a.m., just as the doctor was preparing to sign the papers confirming a clinical death that had lasted over 4 minutes. No bells were ringing, no dramatic lights, no dazzling miracle. Just a pair of small eyes opening quietly in the stillness. Her mother didn't cry. She simply stared, stunned, afraid that even a blink might cause the moment to disappear. But Emma didn't look at her mother right away. She stared at the ceiling, eyes distant, as if measuring the space between two worlds. Then she smiled. Softly but unmistakably. The kind of smile only someone returning from a place far beyond can give. And just after that, she whispered, "I saw hell, and I wasn't afraid." The doctor froze, pen still in hand. Emma's mother's grip loosened. The entire room fell into a strange silence. But Emma remained calm, as if death were no longer a mystery, as if the real fear was not in losing breath, but in living without knowing why. From that day forward, Emma began to share. Not to shock, not to convince. She simply spoke like someone remembering what had once been forgotten. About the light with no source. About the souls trapped in their regret. About a little girl no one believed, who still chose to return. She spoke in simple words, yet each one carried the weight of the soul. And what left the adults speechless wasn't the strangeness of the story. It was something deep within them that stirred, as if they too had once known that light. They had just forgotten. A year later, Emma was invited to speak at a large church gathering in her region. At the end of the service, the pastor asked her one final question. "What made you unafraid when you said you had seen hell?" Emma looked at him, then at the hundreds watching, and replied, with that same gentle smile, "Because I saw a tiny light in the darkest place. And I knew if that light is still there, then hope is too." Her answer did more than bring the talk to a close. It brought an entire journey full circle, a loop that had opened in those first trembling seconds. What began in fear ended in understanding. Along the way, a 9-year-old girl crossed through death itself simply to remind grown-ups of a forgotten truth. Love never disappears. It can be covered over by noise, by fear, by haste, and by our own hands, yet it never stops shining beneath the dust. Emma is not an angel, and no one has declared her a saint. She still lives as a child, still goes to school, still paints pictures, still asks questions no one can answer. Yet from that day forward, one fact remains beyond dispute. Whenever Emma smiles, people cannot help but think of the light. Perhaps that is exactly what Jesus hoped to plant, not a grand miracle, but a quiet reminder in every heart that we once knew the way home.